evening, folks. My name is Marcus Pockner. I want to welcome all of you here. I just want to be sure I've come into a couple of you and be sure we're all in the right room. This is on the proposed development of the southwest corner of 287 and Arapahoe Road. Okay, it sounds like there was I just want to explain to everybody, there's another meeting about a different site, and they somehow merged a picture of our site into that invitation. So if anybody sees that on Nextdoor or anything like that, it has our picture, but it's about an entirely different site. So I'm sorry that happened somewhere. I don't even know what that development is or how that happened, but our picture was merged into that. So we may have a few people walk in and then say, I don't know what this meeting's about, and then we'll handle it that way. So I do want to thank you all. Again, I'm Marcus Pockner. I'm with a company called the Pockner Company. I want to welcome you all for joining us. We really appreciate this. This is a introductory meet and greet kind of meeting to do kind of just our introductions to who we are, what we're thinking about, and frankly learn from all of you and hear from all of you. So I run a community outreach firm. I'm a native of Colorado. I've worked in this area for a long time on a lot of different projects. I've recently worked on a project in Lafayette. Certainly know the community. I guarantee I don't know your neighborhood like all of you know your neighborhood. So I want to be very clear about that. I'm not an expert in this community. I work very hard to actually come into a community and learn from all of you about the site and about the edges and about your neighborhood that you all live in. So we're really thankful tonight to have Jeff Brazel, who's the Community Planning and Building Director for the City of Lafayette. He's going to help us tonight on just go through the Lafayette process. We think that's really important for everybody just to understand that. So we really appreciate Jeff being here, and you'll hear from him for just a minute. So I do want to say we're recording this meeting. We're going to play it again. We know that in the age of what's happened over the last few years, COVID age, a lot of times it's a lot easier to attend now virtually or remotely. We will do that on the next meeting. We actually had some requests to do it in person. That's why we did that. But we'll certainly transition or allow both formats to go. The reason we didn't change that, I want to be clear, in the last week is once you've flyered, you can't go back and really add a link in to do that. Then somebody doesn't get that, they think they've missed the meeting. So we're going to post the recording of this. We will have another meeting and really go through that. So my apologies. I think we are trying to kind of come back in person, but I understand it, and we're more than happy to accommodate virtual meeting requests as we move forward. So folks, that's it. This is the site we're talking about. We can probably go to the next slide here. Just a snapshot of what we want to cover. And again, very informal. We'll try to get through some of this, particularly to get through the Lafayette process, to hear from Jeff and kind of learn about that. These are some of the items we want to cover tonight, just the introductions, the project location, which you know about, the timeline, talk about how we like to do community outreach, talk about the project mission, and questions and answers. And we have the developer here, part of their planning team is here, so we're really here again to start our introductions and then learn from all of you and talk about the process. This is the developer. This is Kensington Development Partners, who has this site under contract. We are not the owners of the site, but we're under contract for the site. That's question number one. I'm with the Pockner Company and then Design Workshop. So would you two gentlemen please introduce yourself to the room? That would be terrific.
Absolutely. I'll start. I'm Jared Eck. I'm a development manager with Kensington Development Partners. We're the company under contract for the site here. We're a mixed-use development group based out of Oak Brook, Illinois, which is about 20 minutes outside of Chicago, Illinois. Our owners have been developing real estate together for over 30 years, predominantly throughout the Midwest in our company's history because we are based out of Illinois. We've done Illinois developments, Wisconsin, Tennessee, Indiana, etc. Our company in total has done about 70 projects amounting to around 8 million square feet of retail. About 3 years ago, we made a decision as a company to expand into the Mountain West region. Denver and the Front Range of Colorado was really the heart of that expansion. We've opened up an office in Denver. I've moved to Denver. So we've got kind of day-to-day boots on the ground here. Historically, Kensington is really known as a retail developer. In the 90s and the 2000s, we've built all different kinds of retail developments, really spanning from power centers to neighborhood shopping centers to grocery anchored centers, freestanding grocery stores. About 8 to 10 years ago, our main business shifted with the market kind of shifting, and we've really become a mixed use developer, and that's become our niche. retail's still really crucial to our developments, but with there being some market demand for multifamily, for apartments, we've really found a niche in doing larger developments with a retail component, commercial component, residential component, a true mixed-use development, and kind of thoughtfully curating that. So with that, we're really excited about the opportunity to develop in Lafayette and greater Boulder County, and work with the community to kind of curate a development that's a community amenity for years to come. So thank you all for coming.
Great, thanks, Jerry.
I'll keep it brief. My name is Rob Berg. I'm the president of Design Workshop. We're a design, planning, landscape architecture firm based out of Denver. We're a 50-year-old firm, about 200 people, and we love focusing on these kind of mixed-use centers. We have a number of them up and down the Front Range, and stuff in Denver and all over Colorado. So happy to be here. Thanks.
Terrific. And I can go through again for those of you who just walked in. I'm Marcus. Very informal kind of meet and greet tonight to give a little background on the project. I'll go through. We have a long history of working with Design Workshop on a number of projects like this site that we can certainly talk about. Next slide, please. So folks, just our objectives, what we want to accomplish tonight really is to understand kind of our inform, listen, and collect feedback to incorporate into the plan. That's what we hope to do. We want to talk about the community outreach, the Lafayette process, again, for all of us to understand where are we, what are we doing, what's this process look like as we move forward, and then very high level planning and design concepts. And actually, when you see the Lafayette process, you'll understand why it's high level. It's a process they go through very mechanically, it's very well laid out, a framework of development to really go through that. Because of that, we won't be very site specific. We don't know what exactly happens on each edge. We don't know the regional transportation or traffic impacts, because a lot of that is based on what the uses are, what they turn out to be, what the numbers look like, all of those things. So I know all of you, can see by head nods, I know you know this, you understand the uses and the challenges and what that means in kind of the process. So, and then obviously the offsite improvements. This site, you all know a lot about it, right? There's been a lot of history here with Erie and the city of Lafayette, the global agreement that came to, you can go to the next slide. So again, you're gonna know a lot of things. I did not go into that in a great detail, because frankly, we just wanna hear anew from you. This is the project site there on the southwest side. You understand the development, you certainly know 9 Mile, I bet many of you were involved in that. The process there and understanding these corners and kind of where we're at, that's perhaps an understatement for some of you in the room, but this is the site, plus or minus 40 acres. I think we're gonna go to the next slide, and then I'm gonna turn it over to Jeff. And again, to have Jeff here as the planning director to just really fairly go through the process and do all of that to kind of explain it. If I may, just one demarcation or move away from the agenda, just to kind of know the room. Do you all just mind like telling me if you're generally from the same neighborhood or maybe the neighborhoods that you represent, just so we can kind of understand maybe where some of the questions are coming from. If we can go back, Rob, maybe just to look at that. Some of you are here, like tell me generally if anybody wants to just tell me what neighborhoods they're from. Yes?
Beacon Hill, right across the street.
Yes, right here. Right there, just north of us in this location, yes.
Stonehenge.
Okay, good, got it. So we know Stonehenge, and is that?
Blue Heron Estates at 95th and Arapahoe.
95th and Arapahoe, Blue Heron, terrific, great. Those three, are there
Old
others?
Town.
Old Town, I understand, Old Town and Emma, yes sir.
Silver Creek.
Silver Creek, okay, good. I know Jeff knows all of these, I know most of them, yes, go right ahead.
West Lucerne, right bordering 9 Mile.
So coming into the site, West Lucerne and so forth, coming off of Lucerne there, okay, great. Anybody else? That probably covers it. That's a great cross-section to really understand it. I mean, honestly, to have 5 or 6 neighborhoods to really get this viewpoint. So, Jeff, again, if you don't mind, I think we can go to your slides. Is that correct?
Yeah,
or you can tell me.
Move up to the front, and if anybody wants to sit at the table, I will gladly give up my spot. So good evening. I really appreciate everybody coming out. I know there's probably a million other things you'd rather be doing than talking about development that is around your neighborhood. So I think this is an important conversation to have with the development team, because they need to understand what the concerns and what your desires are for this development. You know, there's a lot of skepticism, I think, that, well, what is this going to actually do? I think this will help them understand what the expectations of the community are and set the table before they actually start spending a lot of money on design and engineering for the project. So please, I don't have any doubt that you will not be afraid to share your opinions tonight, but please do. I'm going to be taking some notes. I know they will be as well. So I am the planning and building director for the city. Been here for about 2 years now, so I'm still learning a lot. Honestly, I recognize a few faces in the crowd, so it's good to see that, but there hasn't been a lot of opportunity for the city to actually engage one-on-one with the community for the past few years. So it's nice to meet you all, and I hope to get to know you all a little bit more as time goes on. So I'm here for two reasons tonight, to kind of talk about our process, which is kind of boring, but it helps you understand the work that has to go into this type of project before it even gets to a vote before City Council, and that where City Council and Planning Commission weigh in on multiple times. But I also want to share what the community has said thus far about future development on this property through the lens of our comprehensive plan. So if we want to go forward. So this is the property. You've all seen it. Marcus showed a bigger map, but just a little bit more zoomed in closer. So a lot of you are from this neighborhood. The 9 Mile development where Lowe's and some of the other commercial stuff is being built is in the town of Erie, across the street. To the south we have our Coles, and then there's a new neighborhood that's developing to the west called Silo. To the north of Arapahoe Road, it's all county, and it will remain county. There's no plans, and the comprehensive plan doesn't envision that being annexed into the city anytime soon. So the Silo neighborhood is about 400 new homes within that. And then I put a little blue bus. On here because there's a bus rapid transit. There's 2 bus rapid transit routes being planned. One that goes up and down 287 from Longmont all the way down south, and then one that goes along Highway 7. So from Brighton through Baseline up 287 and then west to Boulder on Arapahoe Road. So there's a couple of long-range transportation initiatives being contemplated for this area, and the Highway 7 one is actually has funding to start a starter service in 2026. So these are closer to reality than one would think when we've been talking about BRT and transit for many years in the community. And it becomes important because it helps potentially inform what may happen on the site. So next slide. So this is what they're coming in for right now. This is what they're asking for. And I'll talk a little bit more about what these things mean. So planning of development, rezoning, and annexation. Next slide.
Can I ask you a question right before?
Absolutely. Yeah.
We're talking about mixed use. You keep showing mixed use everything. That actually hasn't been determined yet, has it?
Yeah,
Not
let me
yet.
get into that.
Okay, you're
Yeah.
gonna go into that?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely, absolutely.
Thanks for asking that question.
Yeah.
It was a blank or a disconnect for me.
Yeah,
I
let
was looking for it.
me walk you through how they potentially get there. So, so when we talk about land development, it's actually a long process that happens within any community. It starts with community and neighborhood planning, and then we go into this development review kind of continuum, where we first look at regulations and zoning on the site, and if that's approved, they look at putting infrastructure in place, roads, water, sewer, and then we actually go to the buildings at the very end. So there's like an overlap of things that happen within each of these 4 different phases. So planning is like engaging with the community, trying to understand what the long-term goals of the community are, actually doing work ahead of time before anything's proposed, so that when development comes in, there's at least a common understanding of what might potentially happen on the site. And then regulate, what rules do we need to put in place to actually guide development, and then designing and actually building at the end. So before a building can pop out of the ground, there's a lot of work that has to be done. So next slide. So why is community and neighborhood planning important? This phase is important because we need to have a common understanding across the broad community about what does Lafayette want to be in the next time horizon. And we do that by engaging the community through intentional outreach processes and it all accumulates into our comprehensive plan. We just redid the comprehensive plan, started back in, Karen, like in 2018? 2018, it took a long time to get through COVID, but we finally adopted it last year at this time, in November. And so the city has a brand new comprehensive plan that not only goes into development and where development can and may occur, but it also talks about where development is off limits, and also goes into more things than just development, about how the city governs itself, how we want to foster an inclusive and eclectic community, and some of the services and how we govern and provide services to our community. And so we got a lot of good feedback in our comprehensive plan. And so we think the comprehensive plan represents at least a good understanding of where the community wants to go over the next 20 years. And this is also important because it allows for consistency over time, because these things don't happen overnight. The city doesn't develop overnight. And so if we have a bedrock that we can always point back to that says these are the community's expectations, these are the values and expectations that we make decisions around, it helps prevent more randomness happening. So like, if I like something and it doesn't jive with the comprehensive plan, I can't just come in and say, I would rather have this than what the plan says. The plan has the force of the community behind it. So the next slide. So what does the comprehensive plan actually say? So this is what the questions about mixed use. Why are we talking about mixed use here? Well, the comprehensive plan does a couple of different things. It does have an urban growth boundary. So this urban growth boundary says these are lands that are eligible to be annexed within the city and developed in the future. And if you're not within the urban growth boundary, you're not eligible to be annexed within the city or have urban level growth unless the comprehensive plan happens to be amended in the future. So one, it provides guidance about what lands can and cannot be developed in and around the community. This parcel happens to be within the city's urban growth boundary, and it has been so for some time. The town of Erie kind of disputed that for a while, and that's where some of that conflict with Erie was. But there was an agreement that was reached, and we kind of solidified the boundaries of things that can happen in Erie, things that can happen in Lafayette, things that are not supposed to happen in Erie or Lafayette. So this site is within the city's urban growth boundary. The other thing the comprehensive plan does is it establishes these place types. There's a menu of place types like housing areas, open space, neighborhood mixed use, and then what we're talking about tonight is adaptable commercial. And it describes what the objectives of these place types are and how they should develop over time, and what characteristics need to be put in place in order to guide development for those things. So I want to talk about adaptable commercial a little bit here. So adaptable commercial is trying to do a couple of different things. It's trying to look at our existing commercial areas and seeing how they might evolve over time into something more than just big box or commercial areas and parking lots. Keene Supers is a great example. So Keene Supers is currently located at Baseline and 287, and it's shutting down and moving to the town of Erie at 9 Mile. So 9 Mile will have a new grocery store, but the city will be left with a vacant building at Baseline and 287. So what happens? What happens in that vacant building? Ideally, another business comes in its place, but what if another business doesn't come in its place? How does that commercial center adapt over time to something that is more vibrant and more sustainable and more neighborhood oriented? So adaptable commercial looks at existing big regional commercial centers and says, how do those things adapt over time from single-use buildings like Walmarts, Kohl's, and gas stations into neighborhoods that are much more vibrant and serve and integrate within the community? It also takes that same approach for vacant land and says, how do we develop commercial land within the community so that it's learns from the lessons of the past and is not single use and is actually destination oriented, where people want to actually go and visit, people want to live around, people want to walk through and experience it, rather than everybody having to drive to these things to do one errand and then drive back home and call it a day. And so adaptable commercial is just what that means. Commercial that can be adapted to over time into neighborhood mixed-use neighborhoods. It wants the commercial development to be centered around places and people. So buildings oriented around streets, buildings oriented around public spaces, buildings oriented around parks, not buildings oriented around parking lots. It wants to take advantage of transit. So traffic is on the minds of a lot of folks tonight. Traffic is generated because we have to drive everywhere. If we can create these mixed-use neighborhoods, it tamps down the aspect of that everybody has to drive everywhere. It tries to integrate our existing neighborhoods into new neighborhoods so people feel comfortable walking and biking to these places rather than getting in their cars and driving. And it also promotes placemaking, and people want to actually go to these places rather than just go and do a transaction with a grocer or a car shop or a gas station or anything like that. So ultimately the goal is that we establish something that can evolve over time into much more vibrant neighborhood that takes advantage of transit. So that's what adaptable commercial is in a nutshell, and there's actually some pictures that kind of illustrate this, so if you want to hit the next slide. So the comp plan actually shows these diagrams about how do existing retail centers transform over time into more mixed-use development, and so this is like a continuum of that. And what do we want to set up new development so that we get that closer to day one than it takes 50 years to do that. So there's another graphic in here that just has a little bit more three-dimensionality to it as well. So that's what the comprehensive plan says about this parcel. It says, one, that it's eligible to be annexed into the city, and then it provides guidance for what development should look like. It also gives us the ability to say no. If things do not match up with the comprehensive plan, we have the luxury to say no in this community. We want to make sure we get it done right, and if we can't get it done right, we have the ability to say no. So that's an important thing. So back to process. So next slide. Thank you. So in those 4 buckets, we're at the beginning. We've done some planning, community planning, so we have our comprehensive plan. So now we're in what I call the regulatory and neighborhood design phase. So this is where they're going to propose something, and we have to evaluate it against the comprehensive plan. Does it meet the comprehensive plan's objectives or not? And what rules do we need to ensure that the vision of the comprehensive plan actually is manifested through development, not that unintentional outcomes happen. So what is the zoning? What is the modifications to the zoning? What is the land uses? What does the street layout look like? What does the open space and parks layouts look like? This is where we're at right now. Land use planning and neighborhood planning. Next slide. So I apologize, the screen's a little small. So we're creating we're looking at their proposed development to make sure it's consistent with the comp plan, and then we're creating rules and regulations to ensure that the vision in the comp plan is realized, and that we put those rules and regulations in place on the property through rezoning and through our plan unit development process. So we'll look at land use, we'll look at zoning rules like setbacks, height, lot coverage. We'll look at street layouts. We'll look at where the public spaces are required to be. And we'll start establishing rules that govern development on the site. So the next slide. This is our plan unit development process. So there's a lot of bubbles up here. And so the thing I wanted to point out is that the plan unit development process consists of 3 phases: sketch plan, preliminary plan, and final plan. The sketch plan is a conceptual plan that will be submitted to the city to help us do an overall review of their proposal against the comprehensive plan. There's not a lot of technical review that happens. It's like, does this meet or does this promote the comprehensive plan goals and objectives? And if not, what is the feedback that we need to provide these guys that they need to do if they want to move forward, so that their plan is more consistent with the comprehensive plan goals. So sketch PUD is a conceptual review of their proposed development. That's where we're at. From sketch PUD, we get into preliminary plan unit development. That's when they start engineering and designing the site. and then final PUD is when things are actually approved. And the key on the final PUD is City Council will not make any decisions on annexation or zoning until we have this final plan unit development ready to go. So we can look at it holistically. We don't want to annex property into the city until we know what the outcomes are. So it makes it easier to say no if the outcomes aren't right. And I think that's important because I think there's a lot of people in the community that think we just process things and recommend approval. There's actually a lot of stuff that goes into there, and the word no is used more often than the word yes. And so we need to make sure before we do something permanent like annex property into the city that the development proposal is right for the city. From there we go on to subdivision, and then we go on to vertical construction and site planning. So they're at the very beginning of the process. And I will say each of these takes some time.
How does the comprehensive plan and jive with anything from the county, or county planning?
Yeah, so we do involve the county in our comprehensive planning stuff, but this is about Lafayette. So the coordination happens when, with the county primarily on things after, not like land use, but like transportation efforts and open space acquisition and stuff like that. So the city looks at the city and what does the city want to be, and the county is not really engaged in that aspect traditionally.
So the county doesn't have its own comprehensive plan?
The county does have its own comprehensive plan. Yeah.
I was just wondering how that all jives.
Yeah. Well, the county does have places where they anticipate urban development, and when I mean urban development, I think that's more than a farm is what I call urban development. So where they anticipate urban development and when they anticipate preservation of a more rural development pattern and agricultural pattern. So there is that.
So this development borders the county.
Yes.
So is there an interface automatically with the county because you border the county space?
Well, what do you mean by interface?
Well, I mean, does this just proceed independently, or do you work with Boulder County as to what the impact is on the north side of Arapahoe compared to the south side of Arapahoe?
Yeah, Boulder County is a referral of all the city's development projects where we border the county. We do ask for their input.
And can you name who it is at Boulder County that you specifically interface with?
We interface with the entire planning department there, and sometimes we interface with the Public Works Department.
Is there an individual or a chief of operations there that we would point to?
Yeah, I can get you that information. Yeah.
Actually, if you could send it out to all the people that are here.
How many people are county residents? Okay.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry, you mean county as in?
Not in the city,
Outside.
yeah,
Not
outside of the city, yeah.
We're unincorporated Boulder County.
Okay.
Because
And-
we have a zoned rural agricultural corridor that is maintained throughout Boulder County.
Yes.
It actually runs into your proposed development.
Yeah,
here.
it's gotta happen somewhere. It happens at Arapahoe Road.
Right.
Yeah.
But we can probably maybe work together a little bit to try to make it less.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the point, is you've got a lot of people who are impacted on the north side of Arapahoe who do not have a voice in Lafayette.
Yes.
And
That's true.
they're also just raging mad about the fact that the Lowe's development took place without consulting us,
Yeah.
and the traffic pattern that was established at Arapahoe and 287.
Okay.
Nor was there a similar meeting for Silo that I'm aware of.
Nothing.
Zero.
I'll add that unless it's changed very recently, the director of planning for Boulder County is a man named Dale Case, C-A-S-E.
Okay. So thank you. We'll make sure we get information out. If you make sure you've signed up for the contact information.
Yeah, in addition to the impact on the north side, for obvious things, I'm concerned about the pollution of our light pollution, our noise pollution,
Correct.
our traffic pollution.
You're here.
Oh, good,
I
yeah.
mean,
On a
you know,
busy day,
all
we
these
get it.
developments, you know, I noticed like the second thing on your first chart there was, then we change zones. We do zoning changes. And that's exactly what happens, is something's zoned agricultural and the next thing you know, it's zoned for development. And everybody around there, and I'm not just talking about the adjacent communities, but the entire area And
Yes.
fact is that we're bordering Erie, and I don't know what you want to call their zoning mess, but, that's what I call it. And, these other factors that go into it concern me greatly.
Yes. Yeah, I understand. Like, you guys are, you were here before the city expanded to its current size. You're gonna stay here, and you are impacted around the universe around you. I completely understand that. So there's nothing I'm gonna say that's gonna alter what's happened in the past. I'm just trying to talk you through what the process is. And so the process includes engagement with the community. So I will say on the next slide, there's just a little bit more granular stuff. So tonight is a neighborhood meeting. This is voluntary. Our code does mandate additional neighborhood meetings throughout the process. So at least one at sketch plan, at least one at the at preliminary plan. Additional neighborhood meetings as warranted. They're committing to a higher level of engagement with the community than what our code provides for, and they'll go through that when they get to their point. So we're here. This is not the end of the road. This happens a couple of different times throughout our overall process, and it takes a long time to get to a building permit. So that's kind of the takeaway of the process, is that there's going to be a couple of different opportunities for engagement. Wanted to provide you all with what the city's comprehensive plan says about any development on this site and the city's goals for development on this site. And then in addition to this neighborhood engagement, everything is brought before the Planning Commission and City Council, and they have public hearings on this as well. So lots of opportunity for input, and they've agreed to do a little bit more than what the code requires, the minimum that the code requires. Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
read any of that. Can you
Yeah.
just go through those
Yeah.
steps real quick?
So voluntary neighborhood meeting. They have a pre-application meeting with staff. So we've been talking, but there's been no official applications submitted to the city yet. After we have a pre-application meeting, there's an online period where they actually have to post their plans for the project. So for the sketch plan, you're going to see a higher level conceptual idea of what they want to do. When they submit that, the city will post it online. There'll be a process for you to provide input at that point in time. And then we review that input with the development team before they actually go for a formal submittal. So nothing formal has been submitted to the city at this point in time. After the formal application, there's a required neighborhood meeting. So the code mandates a neighborhood meeting take place. Then it goes into the technical review by city staff, and this could take a couple of iterations, but they submit something, we provide them feedback, they choose to either revise it or not, and then we move on they could resubmit, or we move on to public hearings. Sketch plan is not intended to be this long drawn out process, because the sketch plan is meant to be conceptual in nature, high level feedback, and what you'll see is that the sketch plan will advance to Planning Commission probably within a 6-month period. Planning Commission will be able to have that public hearing. Everybody's invited to that. And that's the chance for Planning Commission to give formal feedback to the development team on their proposal. And then something new that we're doing is we're automatically elevating that sketch plan to City Council after the Planning Commission's had an opportunity to weigh in on that. The reason we're doing that is our development process, the way it's written in code, the City Council may not see it for many, many years, and that's just not viable. So we are elevating this to City Council sooner rather than later, so they have the opportunity to weigh in before too much time and engineering is spent on the project. So I know there's a couple of questions. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, I can't see super well from back here,
Yeah.
so I was just wondering, when you say mixed-use commercial, does that include like housing or is it purely commercial?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Sorry, sometimes I'm in my head too much. Mixed use means not only mixed horizontally of both commercial and residential and employment uses, but vertically as well. And it's important that we do that because the more compact you can be with development, the more vibrant the development can be.
So it'll be like
Yeah.
multiple buildings, multiple commercial
commercial?
That's what the comprehensive plan envisions, yes. And so it could be a mixed-use building. It could be commercial next to residential. It could be a variety of residential types. Like our comprehensive plan actually envisions a diversity of housing types. We don't want monocultural housing because we have people with different needs, people with different economic profiles that can afford different types of housing, and people that frankly just don't want or can't afford single-family large lot development. So the comprehensive plan really puts an emphasis on a wide range of housing types at different price points for different people with different abilities and needs as well. So, yeah.
Will the neighborhood be notified on all these steps any kind of way?
Yeah, if you
So
got
we
a
don't miss it?
yeah, if you got a flyer,
I did get a flyer.
if you did get a flyer, you're gonna get a mail notice too.
Okay.
So
All right.
what they did was use the city's prescribed distance for notification for the flyers. So if you got a flyer hand delivered, you should be getting mail notices. The city's also gonna stand up a website that we can post information on this as well. So you can follow that along. We have many community advocates in the room, and we rely on them to get the word out as well. So we will continue to do that because we think it's important that people know what's going on. Yeah.
I would also note, just for notification, that I forget what is it 700 feet?
I think it's 750.
750. So I live much farther than 750. The only reason I knew about this is because there's a thing you can subscribe to on the city website that gives you information on a daily basis. And I recommend, if you're not within 700 feet, I recommend you go on the city website and figure out how to do it. I can't really explain it because it took me a while to do it. But it is there, and it does give you notices on a regular basis. And because the other thing is, I think the city should expand that 700 feet.
We are looking
to much
at that.
Because it's much more than 700 feet that's affected by this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are we talking about multiple story buildings?
Potentially. So
they could be 4 stories high in Rocky View and the Rockies, right?
Right.
Okay.
So the comprehensive plan talks about height. The comprehensive plan talks about a maximum height of 3 stories, which is kind of permitted just generally within the community. It also talks about potentially to go a little bit higher than that if it's around transit or in exchange for community benefits like affordable housing or other benefits. So right now,
so the answer is yes.
yeah, it could go up to three stories right now. Yeah, it could go a little bit higher. It's part of the outreach process that we need to figure out. Yeah.
Because you just mentioned that there will be public transit right there.
Yes.
So it can, again, the zoning laws are flexible depending on which one you want to spend.
But it's within their.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last part.
So they can take.
Never mind.
Okay.
That's a good point.
Question here?
Yeah. Vicky, you had a question?
Jeff, as far as the public transit goes and the bus down Arapahoe, how is that going to be accommodated? Is there talk of an additional lane or anything?
Yeah. It's a great question. So there's a couple of things. I know Arapahoe Road's a nightmare at rush hour.
Rush hours all day long now.
Well, I mean, I do drive down it at lunch.
Ride your
and it's
bike
not,
on it.
Well,
Die.
yeah, but exactly. There's no sidewalks or bike lanes or anything like that. So there's a couple of things that are going along Arapahoe Road right now that are being planned on. Arapahoe Road west of 287 is a state highway. So there's a lot of regional stuff that we have to do. CDOT ultimately governs that. They're looking at modifications to the Arapahoe and 95th intersection to improve traffic flow through that. We're also looking at how do we set that up for multimodal transportation, so bikes and peds. The town of Erie is looking at Arapahoe east of 287 for widening of that in conjunction with development. And then we have these BRT studies going on, and like, what does Arapahoe Road between 287 and Boulder look like? How do you accommodate high-frequency bus? How do you accommodate bikes and peds? So there's a lot of effort being done around that about what Arapahoe might evolve into, but what I think we're trying to avoid is Arapahoe Road evolving into another highway. right? Because that impacts community character and some other things. But we know it's a problem. There's long-term thinking around that.
I've already signed it.
I'll grab it from
Yeah.
there, sir. You can just leave it there. Thank you.
And then with this particular development, that's something that we have to analyze is how does this development impact the traffic patterns around there, and what improvements would this development be required to do to accommodate for any traffic impacts that they might have.
So would there be a traffic study then?
Absolutely, yeah. The traffic study would come at the preliminary PUD stage. So after council has kind of reviewed the overall concept and said yes, but, or yes, or no, then they actually spend some money on engineering and design for the project, and a traffic study is required.
By the state?
By the city,
CDOT?
by the city.
City
Yeah.
of Lafayette.
No, by CDOT?
Yeah, CDOT's involved in that process as well because there's state highways
Right.
bordering this,
So
yeah.
the study is done by the city of Lafayette and CDOT together or separate?
The city and the state will be reviewing the traffic study.
Did they do one for Silo?
No. And they didn't do one for Lowe's either.
Well, I can't speak for Erie. I'm pretty sure, I wasn't around for Silo, but I'm pretty sure Silo has one. Now, whether that got daylit or whatnot, I don't know, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's been nothing.
Yeah.
And I would just like to add that the study for the traffic on Arapahoe between 287 and Boulder, all that preliminary stuff, that was done in 2018, 4 years ago, and nothing has happened. All that multimodal stuff,
Yeah.
zero.
Things
And
take
so
time, yeah.
we're very impatient about this because
Yes.
we have kids in our neighborhood
Yes.
that are trying to cross Arapahoe, trying to cross 287, and we can't even approach the light. I mean, come
Yeah.
to the corner of Stonehenge Drive and try to go across either of
Can't do
those.
it. No.
You can't.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, the road was not designed for people
No
outside of
turnovers.
cars in mind. Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Even for cars, it's not designed.
So folks, listen, you have the planning director here, so he's much more interesting than I am. I just want to give you a little check-in. It's 10 to 7. And we do have a few slides that just talk a little bit about kind of our pillars as a development. Jeff is here to talk about the overall process, and I don't want to just leave him there. So if Jeff can, he's been very gracious. I'm sure he'll stay. But if you want, we can get to that because probably a lot of these are directed at us instead of just the planning director. But I'm happy to whatever you want to do. Yeah.
I think this was it. So I'm listening and I'm taking notes. This is being recorded. This is important that we actually hear from you all. So I appreciate this. I appreciate the invite you brought.
I think there was a question over here. Yes, please, go right ahead.
How would affordable housing be defined for this project?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm going to give you a little bit longer answer. The city has a growth management regulation in place, and right now, and what that does is it only permits 1,200 housing units within a 6-year period, any 6-year period, and we're just about out of those allocations. And so the next 6-year period doesn't start until 2025, 2026. There's an election that has to happen and so forth. But one of the exemption provisions is that if a project provides 40% or more of affordable housing, they would be exempt from that. This is what they've indicated that they're trying to achieve. Affordable means 80% deed restricted, permanently deed restricted at 80% Boulder County area median income or less. That's what affordable means in perpetuity. So I will say that puzzle is hard to solve. 40% is a high threshold, and to date, the only projects that have been able to solve that are 100% affordable housing projects. There's never been a mixed market rate affordable development that's solved that equation yet. They're going to try their hardest to solve that. We'll see. So, sorry.
Great.
High hurdles. So
I think we've had a lot of
yeah.
challenges. That's really good. That's great. Yeah. Are there other questions? And I'll go into it. And again, please just keep asking questions. Thank you for raising your hand for Boulder County. It really does help us kind of understand that. So this was the process again. We'll put this all available when we put the audio up. We'll put the hard slides behind it just so everybody can look at that and you can read this material. If you've signed up, I'm also happy to send it to you or maybe send you a link so you can download it and look at the slides, okay? So next slide here. I'm gonna be really, honestly, pretty quick going through this because I know we just wanna hear from you all and talk about this. Community outreach, this is what my firm does. We specialize in focusing on kind of a concentric outreach method where we talk to the folks that are most affected. I mean that in very positive ways as well. The opportunities, the planning, all of our edges. You actually described very well the edges of this site, and I think most of you represent those neighborhoods that are there, right? So understanding that. So of course adjacent neighbors, and then going out to that broader context. So we're starting here with all of you as we should, and we'll continue to do that. That's really where we learn the most about the site. The next slide, we're just gonna go through these. I will offer this, I'll put my contact information. If you wanna have coffee with me, if you wanna have a small group meeting, if you want me to come to your HOA, I am happy to do so. We do that all the time. I love to hear about that. And again, what Jeff described about the comp plan, when we come in as a development team, we look and are guided by the comp plan. It's an advisory document to us. We look at the plan and then we have to be able to show that we're being compliant with that guidance, right? That's the process we go to. So we're looking at the very same documents that you're looking at as well. Next slide. Again, a lot more about community outreach, but I know you all want to move past that. The project vision and goals. Again, Jeff called it, when we look at the this first phase, is very just concept, right? It's almost bubble drawings, right? Uses that are there, concept. What do you see from conceptual? Does that work within the comp plan and the guidance that we get? So that's the level we're at. We do not know specifics and site-specific planning and some of those things. So what we're looking at here, of course, a lot of you, and I'm going to go very quickly, we of course look at the Legacy Lafayette, the new comprehensive plan that was mentioned. We look at the guidance there, the urban boundary, what it says should happen if this site is annexed in, right? Others get to decide that, but we need to follow that guidance. I do want to just point out, we always, when we look at site, the next couple of slides, and this is such an interesting corner, right? This is the Lafayette zoning map. You have it, it's not zoned because it's in the county, right? All of you that know this site, you look at the county, you look at Erie, you look at all the edges, what's happening on these corners, what informs this plan. So you can go through the next couple of slides here. We certainly looked at the town of Erie map to understand this site, to understand 9 Mile, what was going on there. And then the last one was the county map, right? To really show, this is just says business, right? This shows this in the plan. But we do, and sir, I think you had the question earlier, we certainly look. And when we make submittals to the city or a city, those are referred out to the county, transportation departments, all of those review agencies, CDOT, et cetera. Every one of them reviews it and sends us comments back. So next slide. I think the colors are a little light there, but you all know it. This is your neighborhood. You see what's around it from a context. The one thing I will say is, almost without fail, it is single uses, single category uses. It is either commercial, it is either residential, it is either retail, right? We really don't have mixed use nodes here, a mixed use neighborhood. And I think the city is really taking a step to say, over time, we want to see that become mixed use neighborhoods. I understand it, I understand traffic, all of you are right. It is, I drove here, I come here all the time, I'm probably part of that traffic, right? But the reason is I went to Starbucks, I went and looked at the site, and then I came to here, right? We all go for different single use purposes along this corridor, and we hope to frankly change that evolution to try to bring that this isn't one color. We don't want it to be only one color, we want it to truly have a mix of uses. So that's the location. Again, you all know it much better than I do from a neighborhood perspective. Yes, go right ahead.
You flashed up about 12 different maps. Some
sure.
show the whole thing as a square inch, but some show that corner as being not part of the development. Explain.
Sure, and I'm going to do something because I hate to defer on giving this, but you are saying right here, I think there's a couple of them that have shown a little node here that has some, I think it's some detention and retention area there. So that's what you see right in that corner. You've seen some green space, a number of things. It's a different color. Do one of you gentlemen want to talk about that, just the plan, or Jared? That's part of the history of some of the planning of this area. If you want to talk about it, or I can come back and give my interpretation of that.
Sure. So the hard corner that was shown on the map, exactly where Marcus is pointing, that's currently owned by the city of Erie, the town of Erie. And that is actually the underlying landowner is working on some land swap documents with the town of Erie so that the town of Erie may potentially build a water tower on, Marcus, if you wouldn't mind.
Could just show it on the other side?
Right there. Yeah. So actually, Rob, can you go back up a little bit? I'm happy to show this. So folks, again, this is kind of when you come into a site, you see different things that are other agreements. So go ahead, I think maybe one more up. I may be wrong, I thought I saw it as well. So that shows a little bit of it, right? So this, you see that little corner right there that people are talking about? That's actually, you're right, as a square.
It was very obvious.
Yeah, exactly, and that shows how that's been carved out. And as you see over here, it's currently in the town of Erie, right? That corner is right there, and it's called a PD, a planned development. So Erie actually owns that corner, and they have been working through a land swap with the owner of the site. We're not the owner of the site, again, and that is also, and I don't want to get way over my skis here, but this is part of a global settlement between the cities, between Lafayette and Erie. There's a great deal of litigation, and they came to an agreement on a number of issues. Part of that involved this issue here. There. So that's something that's being worked out. I'm not disclosing that to all of you. We don't know the details, but we're working through that from a planning method. So again, that's Erie and Lafayette. Yes.
How are the monuments impacted? We have the World War I monuments on the corner.
That we're trying to.
It's a great question, and I'll get that back to you.
That?
Yeah, I'll be happy to go through that and figure that out, sir. I'm sorry, I don't know that answer today. Again, this is probably, if I would say back to you, this is what I want to hear, right? And then we're going to owe you that answer. So your question is, how are the monuments being handled?
If I can answer that really quickly.
Yeah.
So there's a working group that was formed from a variety of folks across the county that are working with CDOT on that, and they have identified a few different alternatives for that. They're working through that process.
We're aware of that.
Those pillars are currently in the town of Erie. They're currently within CDOT right away, so the city has been engaged in that effort as support, understanding that this property will likely be annexed at some point. But we know
The
that.
historical significance did make a difference to them?
To who?
To Erie?
Yeah.
Nothing
That's something for Erie. I'm not gonna
I'm sorry,
respond to Erie. Yeah,
I just like,
yeah. No, I mean.
I'm just like looking at this corner here and I'm thinking, you know, I've lived here for over 30 years and I didn't get one notice of anything about any of that.
Yeah.
How's that happen?
I think that was all designated wetlands.
It was, there was a lake
Well,
there.
it was a reservoir at one point.
It was a reservoir.
Well, Prince Reservoir on the other side.
But
It was the overflow
On
from
our-
Prince Reservoir, yeah. They were connected. They were.
Yeah, and they said, oh, that'd be perpetual wetlands.
I'm just saying that has not been mentioned.
I appreciate it. No, it's a great.
There's monuments out there.
Yep, thank you very much. And we're taking notes, we're recording this, we're tracking all of these comments so we can come back and engage through it. If we can go through, so thank you for pointing that out on that corner. There's an issue there that we'll work through. Yes, it's the entire project site. We would be engaged in finalizing that agreement if that works out with the city of Erie. So just know it is the whole site, but you very correctly pointed out that that has some different uses underneath it. Next couple of slides here. This is, folks, you all talked about it. I promise we only have one or two more slides. These are our pillars. I hate to just use that after that was just said, but to go through what we're talking about. So when we talk about a mixed-use development or a mixed-use neighborhood, what we think of, what guides us, mixed housing products, a type and variety of housing on this site so I can live there, I can walk to coffee and maybe do shopping. We want that to be kind of the ethos of this site, to look at a commercial anchor, not in a traditional way, but to have an anchor, to have that draw, to maybe even change traffic patterns where we change and we go here and don't drive maybe 5 miles away, that this becomes more of a complete neighborhood. Main Street, you've heard that a lot, a Main Street activation. How that happens, how that facilitates both retail and residential and pedestrians and bikes and parks, those things. Parks and open space, do not think we're dismissing that. That is actually such an integral part of that. Jeff mentioned earlier some guidance that's on the site. There's also guidance on percentage of open space that needs to be on this site. So just know that there's already parameters put in place. We can go through those, but that's also on the site. That really, to me, is kind of the banner. It results in mixed-use plan development or mixed-use development. That's our goal. We're looking at all of those uses potentially on this site, and that is horizontally and vertically. Yes, sir.
Is a hotel envisioned as part of this?
You know, I look very quickly out of the corner of my eye to these gentlemen when you say things like that. I think that is it's a use that we certainly are familiar with. It's a use that we plan a lot. I think the hotel market has probably been impacted as much as anything in the last couple of years, and we're actually all trying to figure out where that market is coming back, and I mean that from a performa market standpoint. So yes, we will look at that. Yes, it actually works very well in this kind of environment. We just don't know where that's at right now.
Where
Yes.
does that hotel fall under those banners?
Where would that, I think, you know, honestly, I mean, you can look at a Main Street activation, right? Any of those things. We see a lot of settings where a hotel is actually part of that, or part of, you know, maybe there's retail on the ground level and hotel above that, or multifamily residential. Any of those things can be really a different type of housing product or that type of use. Yes, sir.
So this may be a little ahead, but when talking about commercial anchors, when it comes to like businesses that you're envisioning to be in the mixed-use development, are you trying to look for more like smaller scale, like maybe avoiding like the bigger like multinational chains, or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's great, and I won't even look away, so it looks like I was already like, oh gosh, you hit me. No, I think that one of the things, and I think this is an interesting discussion where we call it an anchor, and then earlier you heard from the planning director about that adaptive commercial use, how that's changing and how over time it will change for existing centers or new centers, how you want to go to that. So we probably traditionally think about, and Jared talked about when we started, we used to think it's really anchors, right? With the big parking field, right? And all of those things. Now a lot of times it still has to have that parking, but it's more embedded in that neighborhood, right? So I think we believe that it's probably there has to be what makes us go there, right? What makes you, is it a grocer? Is it a hotel? What is it that really drives some of that or attracts people there? So we're certainly looking at that, but in the scale, I think in the context, and I'll let our planners talk about that, to really have a main street, right? And to have more of that neighborhood feel, it has to engage the park or the street. So it can happen, but I think it has to be in a different form, right, than it used to be. It's not a big box. It's something that's more embedded in the community. Design Workshop, and we as well worked on in Lowry, in Denver, this last project called Boulevard 1. And I'd encourage everybody to look at it. It's got a small grocer called Clark's. It's got an urban format, is what they call it, Target, which is about a 30,000, a very small Target. And then it's got a lot of residential on it as well, and other commercial. And it's all done in a traditional setting. So that we're in a much more kind of, you know, neighborhood setting. So that's the kind of things that we try to attract. Okay, thank you. Great. Yeah.
Included in any of this study, I don't know how this works, I'm new to all this, is there any kind of consideration for the safety aspect of living in this kind of development through the police? The police are already stretched, they're already, you know, they don't have all their positions filled, they can't find people.
Sure.
And do they get some kind of benefit from all this?
Yeah.
Do they get some extra money?
Yeah, it's great, and honestly, I'll say there, of course, are fees, right, that are generated, taxes that are generated as a development goes through, and Jeff may have a different opinion on this, but I think one of the things we believe, and I mean that generally at this type of a mixed-use neighborhood, is that having even more activation instead of those single uses, right? An empty parking lot at 10 o'clock at night is where problems start, right? But a parking lot that's maybe has retail and residential above it, and there's eyes on the street, as we call it, right, really active, we think they in no way self-police, I don't mean that, but we actually think it's a much safer environment to have active uses. So one, I think by design, we call it, it's actually safety by design on that. But then of course, there are benefits that go to police and all of those things because of taxes. I will say in fire, police, everyone also reviews those plans for things that you would ask about, right? Site angles, all the things, are we creating unsafe areas, those kind of things. So they're certainly a referral agency as well. Yeah. Is there a question back here? Yeah.
Is there any talk on like what amount of the businesses might be mom and pop shops or locally owned versus Target and Starbucks and big businesses?
This is the talk, right? So yes, you saying it, I think is hearing it. Jared gets the great chance to be under contract on the site and to hear all of this. This is something, again, I know folks, and I'm sorry, a lot of you expressed some frustration about another development, you didn't hear about it. This is voluntary, we're not yet in the process, we're trying to learn. So now we're hearing that, I think we're all taking notes and we get it. And I'm sure you're saying find the right blend of that, right? And maybe not have all the big national names.
Just to clarify, I very much would prefer smaller mom and pop places and less like big box stuff. So
Great.
making that clear.
I went the other way, and you know I'm okay. Yeah, go ahead.
We're sort of asking about individual uses. Are you at some point going to talk about sort of the general vision, meaning like, you know, we mentioned hotels, we mentioned affordable housing. Can we sort of generally speak about what you guys are visioning?
Sure. Yeah. Let's see if we have anything. I don't think we, so this is just, and sir, I'm not avoiding your question, okay? I want to say we did not bring a site plan or a conceptual plan, anything like that, because frankly, sometimes we just want to hear, right, if we're on the right way. I think it's important to say these are images of projects that we have worked on and some things that we're talking about. So I may, Jared, Rob, anybody can talk about these, but this shows a little bit of that life above the street, right? Maybe a mix of uses. I know you understand it, but this kind of shows it. So do we want to maybe just opine a little bit on kind of overall thoughts about it?
Yeah, I think this probably talks a little bit to scale and character. So when we talk about 3-story, you know, that image on the bottom right, you know, it's 3 stories right there. You know, the market here in the upper right-hand corner. The idea is that this is a walkable place, and so that we have a mix of uses, but the intention is so that you can spend the afternoon here, not just, you know, the 20 minutes to get in, go to your car, get your groceries, and get out, but that you have an opportunity to, you know, maybe frequent one of the open space, you know, the park areas or some of the neighborhood park spaces. The thing that we're looking at right now from a kind of comprehensive perspective is understanding that you have the silo development to the west of us, understanding that there's, you know, we're bordered by 2 major roadways, thinking about how do we look beyond our boundaries and try to connect, and so how do we bring pedestrian pathways in, make sure we're making really logical vehicular connections so that we're not creating more congestion, but really trying to encourage folks to arrive, you know, by bike or by foot whenever possible.
Are you gonna have an overpass? In 10th Street? Across 287? Seriously, people are gonna.
Or a tunnel, we
Or a
discussed a
tunnel.
tunnel, actually, under 287 to whatever happens.
Yeah, so there's actually as part of the BRT study, the city got a grant with CDOT and Dr. Cog, I think is the one, and we're looking at the station. And the station currently would envision an underpass at 287 as well. So the city's looking at that. It's important to be able to get people across that major barrier safely. Yeah. So it's being looked at.
You all are good planners in here. It's great. I'll come back. The gentleman in the corner had a quick, yes.
Yeah, just I have a couple comments just since we're talking about how this is going to be used. I guess the first thing is I really empathize with the people that live to the north and I suppose to the west of this lot in terms of the impacts, because those are fairly rural areas still. Sure. The lot has grown right up to the border. You know, I'm not one of these people that feels like, you know, the only value of a piece of land is in its potential for development. But I think I'm in the minority, and that's why Denver looks the way it does. Yeah. With an earth mover and a tower crane on every corner. So the way that I see it, I mean, I think there's about 100% chance that this parcel will be developed. And I guess from my perspective, I'll try to keep it short. What I'd really like to see here are a couple things. You know, first off, when we say mixed use in Lafayette, there's a technical term. I think it's 85% maximum residential with a minimum of 15% commercial. That's really extreme imbalance. I mean, it's not hard to get that commercial down to 5% Lafayette. If we end up with 85% residential here and 15% commercial, we will have failed. The city runs on sales tax. We don't need another ocean of rooftops. We have one of those going into the west at Silo. We have 750 units going in at Sundar. There's a housing development right across the street from the church. You'll see on your way out. Yeah. We have plenty of rooftops. On 287 and Arapahoe Road, we need sales tax generating businesses. So that really has to be more of a balance, a real balance between housing and commercial, not just this finger quotes mixed use where you end up with 90-10 residential to commercial. But we also don't need the opposite. You know, if you want to see terrible urban planning and development, you just look to the south of this parcel. where you see a row of giant concrete and steel big box stores with oceans of parking in front of them. And if you drop somebody in there and say, okay, where are you? It takes a minute. Am I in Centennial on East Arapahoe Road? Or am I in Lafayette? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I understand.
Or in Iowa. Yeah, I mean, that's generic suburban America, and no one likes it.
Yeah,
And so I was
boring.
really,
It's
so,
offensive.
and we also don't need, I really like to say another thing, like, we need to be thoughtful in the types of businesses that we attract here. We don't need a third tire store.
No.
Yeah.
We don't need
Another gas
we don't need
station.
a fourth auto parts.
Hardware store.
And also, somebody was asking me about mom and pop stores. I mean, the reality is, locally owned independent businesses almost certainly will not be able to afford the rents here. I mean, if you look at the new-ish developments on South Boulder Road,
Sure.
where they're public, it's a Chipotle, it's a Floyd's 99 barbershop. It's like, these are all big chains. So in this concept of affordable housing there, I'm glad that that's entering the equation, even if it is just to get around the growth management barrier. But the idea of affordable business, business locations should be included. And just one final thought,
Yeah, no problem.
The word, as Jeff said, and a lot of what he was talking about in our comprehensive plan kind of reflects this. And I'm really glad to hear that. And also, the statement that the word no is being used more than the word yes. That was not always true for anyone that's lived here in Lafayette for more than 12 seconds. And I think it is becoming more true. And I was really glad to hear our planning and building director say that, because we do have a lot of control over what we want to see here.
Agreed.
So,
All great comments. I wrote this down because I want to not check what you said about the percentage, but I want to be sure and focus on that, right? That balance, and just kind of understand that. We're not thinking about it that way, but I really appreciate what you said. I didn't write down tire store. I told these two gentlemen if we have a tire store, don't even come back. So you've already taken care of that market. It's done. I think you had a question. Yeah.
I was just going to say I have two questions. So first of all, like, how far along sort of are the drafts for like what it could be laid out like? Because I know we're probably still in the very rudimentary stages of that. But second of all, I'm not sure if this is, your guys' domain, like if you guys have any control over this, but I live really close to this development, right? I live right off of Arapahoe, but I have some concerns about like the sort of parking, because I would love to walk there, but there's no sidewalk, so
agreed.
it's like, I was just wondering if when this project is going to be built, are there any plans to like include sidewalks, things to make it where I don't have to drive my car there, where I can walk because I'm so close.
Great. And I'll say, like, that is certainly, as you go through the process on our own site, right?
Yeah.
Of course, putting all sidewalks and all of those connections. We talked about pedestrian focused as well, and bicycle, not just vehicular, right? I think the other thing, and I said this, I don't mean to say that in a negative, like the off-site improvements, that is also something you talk about a lot, right? What are those off-site improvements that are maybe off our immediate site? I will say this, and I don't mean one of the great challenges of this site is that silo neighborhood is planned, right? I wasn't involved in that, none of us were involved in that. But it's our western neighbor, most immediate western neighbor, right? And so I heard a few people say maybe they think it's more than 400 units. Whatever it is, it's a residential neighborhood that's immediately on our western side, right? And so then you have Arapahoe and 287. Like, there are some really interesting and very different edges on this site, right? So it's how do you pull people into this site in a safe manner? And you have to also, of course, think about that traffic pattern, right? It is the southwest corner. Is that you going north or going southbound that makes you pull in there in the morning for coffee, whatever it is? So you're absolutely right. We're trying to think of all of those things. Yeah, please, Karen.
Following up on what Seth said, I went to this kind of meeting about the Lafayette Promenade where Kohl's and those places are, and they showed us a lot of, this is going to be great, look at this, and what it is awful.
Yeah.
And we've got, a tire store and a dentist and a gas station, and you go there and promenade.
It's not walkable space.
Horrible.
No, it's not walkable space.
You don't spend a whole afternoon walking around
It's
there.
just awful. And it's there, it's, prime visibility, everybody drives by there. This is, this is what we got when we were told we were getting something great. And so, you know, there's a lot of skepticism, I'm sure, from a lot of us. The other thing, I'm going to go in another direction here, but this is my chance.
Yeah.
The wetland, the little wetland area, means a lot to a lot of people, and I'm sure a lot of folks here remember when before 9 Mile, when it was the reservoir, and how fantastic that corner was when you would drive by, and there was the reservoir, and on the other side was this little marshy area, and all the birds would fly over there, and it really means a lot to a lot of us.
Well,
and it's not just Erie may call it a stormwater basin, but we don't. It's a part of this community. Even though I live in Old Town, I love that little section. And anything that you, and I know what the deal is that you want. That's in Erie right now. Erie will de-annex it if they can make an agreement with the landowner to put a water tower on the rest of that property, and then that can be part of the project. If there is any way to take that corner and enhance it and make it more of a wetland, more of a little wild area, please don't take that away. Do something to preserve it, because like these folks here, you know, anyone that lives in the rural part, it's like this last little gap.
We have wildlife there. I mean,
listen, I wish Karen would have answered that question earlier about that.
I moved to check out the waterfowl in this area.
Yeah, oh, it's remarkable.
It is a last vestige for the path from the Blue Heron Estates where all these birds pass through. I mean, that's the only place they've got to go.
Great. Yes, and thank you, and you're absolutely right. I would concur with what you said, and the development south of there, Karen, on that side of the street. I mean, it's single use. I mean, it is exactly as you described. I know there's a lot of comments. I'm just checking in. 7:15. We're all okay, right? I'm good to, let's keep going. So we're going to come over here, and then we'll come back to the corner. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I don't know if this question is for you or you, but at what point do we talk about the landscaping of the developed area? You know, trees.
For sure.
Yeah. Green space.
Yeah, a lot of the way to make it for pedestrians and for people is to bring in human comfort. And I know what it's like to live here, and you know how hot it is, especially in the summer. So shade is absolutely critical. The other component to the open space network that would occur through this development is thinking about the habitat and how we increase habitat for the birds and the bunnies that are here already, right? So it's premature to talk about specifics for landscape, but it's absolutely part of the overall design and attractiveness of the development, for sure.
Yeah, who do you consult with on that?
So we're landscape architects, so we're the ones that actually would do all that design work as well. So, yep.
Can you give your cell phone in case you mess this up? Sorry, not yet. Yeah, go ahead.
I know Ellen's had her hand up, but I just want to say, I want to echo that how important it is, how degraded the quality of life is in this area. The people who've lived there for, 20 years. The light pollution, I mean, the coal sign, all the parking lots, the Walmarts, now the Lowe's. Light pollution is horrible. Noise pollution is horrible. Having 60 mile an hour, there's people at 3 in the morning, at 5 in the morning, all night long, every day, ripping down that street with like no mufflers, all night long. The light pollution, the sound pollution, and the air pollution is horrible. I think Lafayette should get rid of their sign with the nice little mountains in the background, because pretty soon, just like in Boulder, you're not going to be able to see the Front Range, which is one of the main reasons that we want to live here, and it's affordable. And it's just crap stuff that's going up. And I don't really care about the sales tax, because it's not worth living here anymore. And I know people will come here, but for all of us who've been here, and it's been our community, it's just really turned into shit. Ellen, you go next, because I know you've been here.
All right, you've been chosen to go next. Yes, go right ahead.
Well, now that she says she doesn't care about the sales tax, is this property in part of the IGA with Erie that we share the revenues that the two towns share in?
It is, yes.
Okay, because and then does Erie have a say on anything in this development? Because we went through all of this with 9 Mile.
Okay.
They had all these little pretty pictures of how it's going to be walkable,
and trees and open space, and they failed miserably on that.
Okay.
And I would like to know if this place is gonna be a hell of a
So
lot
I'm gonna
better.
turn this over. I'm gonna just ask Jeff if it's okay to say, but I want to repeat something he said earlier about this goes through the Lafayette process, right? If our request, and it is, I'm standing here to say we want to go through the sketch area plan, the planning process, the PUD, and then we want to rezone the site because it doesn't have zoning today because it's not in Lafayette, right? And then we want to annex it in. So we will go through, our intention is to go through the Lafayette process. That makes Lafayette be the decision makers. I'm sure that Erie is a referral entity, but they don't have, this would be a Lafayette process.
But they will share in the revenues.
They do share in the revenues, that's right, and we can't change that, right? That's an agreement you all have.
No, but I mean, I will say, like, we looked at what was going across the street at 9 Mile. We looked at what Lafayette did to the south of the property, and the comp plan is a response to that.
Yeah.
So the comp plan is like, no, no on that, something better. So.
Yeah.
Too late for us.
You're gonna hold this to, that's right. You go back here and then we'll come over here. Yes, please.
Since you brought up the lighting issue,
Sure.
I would like, and I'd like it on record, to request lighting like they do in Flagstaff, Arizona, where the lighting is downward.
Is it like dark sky?
Yes.
Yeah.
The light pollution in Flagstaff is minimal, and we're talking about next to your rural neighbors. That would be one thing up front that we could agree on from the get-go.
Great. So listen, we are in such concept level, but I think what we call it dark sky lighting. I don't know if it's the same thing, but we call it dark sky lighting. So we hear that. I'm not answering your questions. I think we're trying to figure out, one of the other things you look at in a mixed use neighborhood is almost that transition to residential, right? Or to you all, to neighbors, to more rural character. How do you transition? And actually, how do you use buffers of even buildings, right? Residential is much more passive than a sign of Kohl's, like I've heard people describe, right? So how do you transition that as well? So I think we try to think about all of those as we think about that transition of uses. So let's talk about those uses, but we hear you entirely on dark sky. We use that in a lot of places, and I think it really changes that impact, right, that it has on neighbors like you. So I'm going to come over here. Yes, please. Yeah.
Would a potential annexation be an act of the council, or would it be put to voters?
It's an act of the council is how it goes. It goes through the annexation, and Jeff described that. You do the PUD, then you do the rezoning and annexation as part of that. So the council, has the full picture of it, but it's an act of council.
Yeah, there is a referendum period.
There is.
It's harder though, for annexations.
Got it. So you could do referendum. Yes, sir.
I heard you say earlier that you guys did a project in Lowry.
Yes.
Are there any other areas in the Denver area we can go look at?
Sure. I mean, that's a great site. I might have, like, maybe if other projects that you've worked on, design workshop. I think each one is unique, right? These are some very challenging edges, right? I don't know if I can describe Arapahoe 287 and then a residential buffer, but that site we call it Boulevard 1 in Lowry. So it's not just overall Lowry, but Boulevard 1, which is the last 80 acres. So it has a little bit of a size comparison. This is a 40 acre, but you can feel a little bit of that there as well. Yeah. Yes.
So I can't echo the comments about thoughtful lighting.
Okay.
Strong enough.
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple other things, just that corner, the northeast corner of
Sure.
that lot is already a wetland. And in your public land dedication, I would really encourage you guys to think of that and enhancing that or preserving that and using that. And not do cash in lieu. And I'd ask the same of our city administration to push for actual land instead of cash in lieu. And then finally, it's pie in the sky, but those pillars, some of you know more about the history of those two pillars than I do, but I know a decent amount.
Sure.
And those are important. And CDOT really screwed up by not doing what they were mandated legally to do in the study, and those things have been compromised. Now, pie in the sky, is there a home for them if they have to be moved? Is there a home for them on this parcel?
Okay.
I don't know.
Nope, very fair. Thanks for the comment. No problem at all. Just to clarify and just to edify a little bit, public land dedication, when you go through a development, usually there's a PLD, we call public land dedication, where you dedicate it to the city or the entity. There's usually a requirement of that. A lot of times, I actually don't know here, you can pay a cash in lieu, a fee, instead of dedicating that. So that was the comment. So have real open space. Don't just buy your way out, I think is the comment of that. Yes?
Sorry for talking so much, but
No,
I
you're
just
doing
wanted
great.
to say, I think I'm a little bit of a minority in that I'm kind of hopeful for this project and hopeful that it could bring affordable housing, but I feel like probably all of us can agree that the last thing I think I would want in this space is something like a hotel.
Okay.
I just feel like that's such a huge building that would take up so much of the lot that it would no longer be a mixed use type of thing.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that something huge, a chain like that would necessarily be a good fit in this community.
Yeah. Well, with what you said, you can talk every time you want to.
Yeah,
so no one
okay.
And I'll just say, I would challenge you. I can't think of some of my favorite Boulder hotels, but there's some wonderful ones. But to think of hotels even at a 3 or 4 story level, like sometimes that really can blend in, and I wouldn't know if it was residential or a hotel. So I think you're right. Nobody's thinking of the 12-story Hilton Garden, you know, that kind of thing. So very fair comment. I think it's trying to fit into this form. Yes?
I'm not, okay. Somebody made a comment that when you drive down 287, you don't really know where you are.
Yeah.
I really, really felt terrible when that happened.
Yes.
I've been around here for 45, 50 years.
Okay.
And I want to see this reflected. I know Oak Brook. I grew up in Elmhurst. It's one of the reasons I moved. Oak Brook is just concrete, maybe attractive, but it's huge, and it could be anywhere USA. And I really don't want that for Lafayette, and I don't know how to be one voice and get it.
You're not the only
You're
one.
not alone.
No, it's great. I think a lot of people, yes, great.
I moved from Southern California down here, and it looks just like Southern California now.
Sure. Yeah. So so folks, it's 7:30, I think, or almost 7:30. I'm going to take maybe one more comment. I know some of you have got to go. I just want you all to know, like, this is what we want. We just wanted to hear, right, and try to understand. It's really our responsibility to come back. Now, I do want to say, as we said, I think Jeff showed that timeline, right? We can do a concept submittal, right? You go through that. That's our choice, right? When we put that in, the city has to, I guess it's fair to say, react to it, right? We submit it, and then that starts that process. We probably will move forward with that, and that will obviously have some of our initial thoughts. But what we know is it's a sketch, right? So much of these things, I think somebody said it, we could probably agree, we want to see maybe a mix. I know some people would rather it just not develop at all. I understand that, but we try to look at what the guidance is and do everything we can to incorporate all those values into a site. So we would do that. I just want to be so clear that this is phase 1 or step 1 of I don't know how many. It's a lot more than 40 steps, right? You have the sketch plan, then the preliminary, and the final plan. You go through that. So we want to do more as a development team. We want to have more meetings. We want to do more things. But that first thing you do have to do to get comments back is to actually give a sketch plan. So I want you all to know why we do that is because we actually don't know what fire is going to say yet, right? What police is going to say, what Boulder County is going to say. We actually have to put something in for them to reply back to us. So no surprise there, but that's actually how we initiate the project. So if we do that, we're certainly going to communicate, or when we do that, I don't want you all to think that we've moved past and we're done talking to the neighbors. It is actually our way of saying city, county, Erie, right, all stakeholders engage with us and give us more thoughts, okay? So we're going to take all of this and put it into probably that concept submittal and then move forward. Yes, sir.
So I just want to stand up and tell the commercial partners thank you for engaging with this community outreach process. It was voluntary. Appreciate that a lot. Marcus, I'm going to take you up on an offer.
You bet.
I'm going to need your email address if you're going to write it down. I want you to get to organize and bring together Jeff, Kensington Partners, Design Workshop, Dale Case from Boulder County, and the CDOT representative. We're going to get together on the north side of Arapahoe Road at your project. We are going to walk to Starbucks. Those of us who live will buy you coffee.
All right.
Yeah. Anyway, and for any of the Boulder County, so part of the Boulder County frustration is we feel like we're not represented, because we're not in Lafayette. I'm happy to take email addresses, and so us Boulder County people of North Side, or whatever, we can organize ourselves and be a strong block here to get safety as the first priority.
Great. And so I thank you very much for saying that. I'll certainly go with you. Sorry, I erased something, but I don't usually write uphill like that. So that's my office number, 303-825-1671, and it's marcus@thepocknercompany.com. Jasper Vu's in the back of the room. Jasper flyered the neighborhood. I do want to say last thing, we flyered you all for a very specific purpose. You are in the formal notification area. We then, because the city is terrific, and I think they want to expand it, they said, we're gonna post it on the website that you mentioned, so the city posted it, and then Karen and other neighbors who really understand the process posted it on the web page and Facebook. So, and we sent emails as well, the city sent emails. So we have tried to so over notice for this voluntary meeting because we want that to happen. Now you're on our list, we'll send it to you as well, but I did want to just almost, it gives you a scope of what that 750 feet is. So we're happy to come to your individual HOAs, whatever you want to do. Just call me there or email me and we'll get something set up, okay? So thank you all. Grab a water, snack, anything you want to bring out. Thanks very much.